recording.
You are watching Our Stories on TikTok, the show that aims to document contemporary Ireland in all of its complexity, depth, beauty and darkness when it comes to it. We hope to represent all the characters, cultures and tribes of the west of Ireland, and Ireland more generally. We're trying to capture images in which we can see ourselves, our past and our future. If that sounds like something you're into, hit the subscribe button there, hey. Hello, and you are listening to the sounds of Paraic and this is Our Stories, and powered by the Galway Anti Racism Network, where we are looking for the stories of all the different kinds of people that you meet in the west of Ireland and Ireland more generally. And I think a really important part of that, it'd be ridiculous if we didn't have a traveller voice on there as well. Do you know what I mean? And even besides that, it's a story and a perspective that I think is fascinating in as much as it's important as well. So to try and do that, today we have a very special guest. Anne Marie Stokes of the Galway Traveller Movement. That's it. I don't know. Do you describe yourself as an activist, Anne Marie?
Yeah, I would, Paraic. It's lovely to talk to you today. And I'm very excited about this interview. Yeah, I would. I describe myself as an activist.
Yeah.
And my area that I work in is education. And I think that education is really, really important. And
Definitely.
for the traveller community, for them to take a lead role in society, like they have to educate themselves.
Yeah.
And
I think even like education is important for everybody, kind of a thing. But even for any marginalised group, it's key. Do you know what I mean? And I think self-awareness as well, kind of, because education, it's more than just having read a load of books. That there's a different, in Latin we'll say, right? Education. It's the root of the word in Latin is to it's something like awaken the genius inside or something, or
I feel too, like education, it opens your mind up to different perspectives, different ideas, and also because the traveller community in Ireland, like there is a high level of racism and discrimination against the community, and the kind of stereotypes that's projected towards the traveller community, it's not reflective of the community by and large. And I feel that by the community educating themselves, they also come to realise through education, that lens, that this discrimination against marginalised groups or ethnic minorities or what have you, it's not just in Ireland that this happens. This happens worldwide. And
definitely. I think I was having a conversation with two younger cousins of mine a few weeks ago, and he was saying to me, well, like, what's the point of knowing the history? And I was like, what do you mean, what's the point of knowing the history? Or what do you mean, what's the... And I was saying, I was breaking it down even to as simple as, so these particular cousins would be Jamaicans that are living in England, but like kind of disconnected from Jamaica in essence. And I was saying, even as simple as something as simple as knowing that we were country people in Jamaica, breaks you out of thinking that we have to be urban, that we have to be in a city. And it's like, so there's all these, I suppose, just to your point, it's a lot more than just reading books or, some kind of, it has a big effect on people to educate yourself and free up your mind. Yeah, that's it, exactly.
Yeah, that's it. And I suppose like you touched on, like your Jamaican roots, and I suppose with travellers, our culture, our ethnicity, like it makes us, you know, who we are, and knowing about your culture, and I suppose educating ourselves about the past, and, you know, all the different different things that happened to the traveller community.
So I was wondering, could we take it back?
Okay.
Before the activism.
Okay.
So where, and this is a question I like asking on the show as well, is where are you from?
I'm from Galway.
You're from Galway?
Yeah, I was born in Galway. And
in the city?
I was born in Galway City, and I was raised in Merview.
Yeah.
And we left Merview when I was about 13, and we moved to Paraic.
Okay.
And you probably know that Paraic is highly disadvantaged area anyway.
Yeah.
But there's a large population of travellers living in the area. But it was a nice place to live.
Yeah. And when you were younger, was the culture very strong in your upbringing?
Yeah, very, very, very strong. Like, my family were very traditional.
Yeah.
And, you know, my mother, like, we, like the girls, like, we learned to cook and to sew and look after the younger children, and we helped our mother, and, like, it was a very strict, very sheltered upbringing.
Yeah.
And like, the boys, like, I had two brothers, and they did stuff that my father would do, or work, or whatever, you know, kind of things, that ways of making money.
Yeah.
But the girls usually, the main thing was, like, minding the kids, staying at home, and, like, when I was younger, like, we just thought, like, we'd get married at a certain age, and we'd get married young, and which I did, and I had my kids young.
Yeah.
And, like, that's, I suppose, at my people of my generation, like, that's what they did.
Yeah.
And education at the time, like, wasn't very important to us, because we felt that, like, that it wouldn't get us anywhere in life, that we wouldn't be able to get a job, or, like, that, you know, that the discrimination, it was so bad, like, that there was no way, it wouldn't have been of use to us, really.
Yeah.
Like, the most important thing for my family, was my parents, was that I could read and write, that I didn't have to ask someone else to tell me what was written in a letter, where my father could read and write well, but my mother didn't, and it was a big regret in her life.
Yeah.
That she couldn't read. And like, as she was older, she was a very religious woman.
Yeah.
And she always said, like, I'd give anything to be able to take up the Bible and read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was, you know, my mother's focus was that we could read and write, but never dreamed of us going on any further.
Yeah.
Because it was just outside of our world.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, for progression, like, to a university or anything like that. It was.
I'd imagine. You see, that's fascinating, and I suppose in a way you didn't see it as anything abnormal, like, or did you? You did, probably.
Well, our view on education, no, because at the time, in our wider circle of our community, our friends.
Yeah.
Like, everyone had the same experience of education.
Yeah.
You know, it was usually quite bad.
Yeah.
You know, that there was a lack of expectations of traveller children.
Yeah.
You know, from the educators.
Yeah.
And obviously, sometimes the experiences of parents, well, that's going to reflect onto their children.
Yeah.
And I suppose that parents would want to have a safe space for their children, and they didn't see schools as being safe.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
You know.
And obviously, there's a huge history behind that as well. Like, that that didn't come out of nowhere. That fear would have been there. I think it's so. I was talking to another member of Galway Traveller Movement last week, and she was saying about how, you know, that the work that you do and you go into schools, and she was saying that on this particular day, but this was normal, that people had never met travellers, or that the kids were saying that they'd never met travellers. Now that's completely not my experience.
Yeah.
Coming from Ballinasloe, it was like, I was in Galway for a couple of years, and I met travellers there, and but even outside of that, the town of Ballinasloe is, of course, you just know the travellers. Do you know what I mean? And I think they're a huge part of the culture of Galway, I imagine. So it seems so strange to me that people, people that have never met travelers, that sounds so weird. But I was saying that to get to this point, that the travellers that I would know and my mother would be great friends with, the older ones, there's such a beautiful culture in them. And like that they have rules.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And ways of doing things, and the faith that they have as well is beautiful. That's the idea that I'd have them in their head, in my head even.
Yeah, I suppose there's a lot of traditions and I suppose and rules and regulations, and definitely towards women. Women seem to be brought up very strict.
Yeah.
And usually they would get married very young, maybe not so much now in modern times.
Yeah.
But in my generation, they got married quite young, have large families. In the traveller community, even today, having a large family is a blessing from God.
Yeah.
And, that's wonderful. They love children. The family is so important in our culture. And you're not in your little bubble with just your spouse and your kids. Your parents, the grandparents, everyone has an input, cousins and aunties and uncles. And
I think that's beautiful. I can see how it might be challenging or limiting, do you know what I mean? But I just think that's because, we had the Celtic Tiger in Ireland, and then from there we get this capitalist, individualist culture, where you would be, and your 2.4 children, and your 212 Jeep and blah blah blah. But I don't know, I think I really love, and maybe I'm generalizing, I apologize if I am, but I really love, when I think of my idea of the travellers in my head, is that they didn't quite sell out in the way that the other Irish society.
I don't think so. Obviously the culture is fluid. It can change to a degree, but they have really held on to a lot of traditions, old traditions. I suppose about the marriage for being very important to the traveller community, having a family, having lots of children. It's, that's like a traveller man to have lots of children. It's such a it's a big boastful thing. It's a blessing from God. And I suppose our religious beliefs so important. And I can say in my own personal story, I was widowed very young with 3 very young children. One just a baby, you could almost say a newborn. And my husband died very tragically. And I think the one thing and the only thing that got me through, and this is talking after 20 years, is my faith. Faith.
Yeah.
And I suppose my family, I suppose if I didn't come from the community that I come from, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's my own bias as well. I'd feel, maybe a bit isolated, but I always had so many people around me. I always had the family there for me, and it just carried me through the whole experience.
My mother is like that. My mother is like that. And, sometimes, we always knew, or she would always tell us that at the darkest times in her life, she had nothing, only her faith. And it's funny now because, things get nicer and then the faith kind of goes away. Do you know what I mean? And then, so I'd be going home and I'd be saying, well, Mammy, God this and God that. And she'd look at me funny. And then I'd say, well, I got it from you. If I'm mad, I've picked up your madness. Yeah. And so I suppose that was a gift from the culture, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. The faith is very, very important to the traveller community. And even now, like in 2022, like I even would say that to the young people, faith is very important.
Yeah.
Like maybe they don't talk about it as much, or it's not as visible.
Yeah.
But I do know if anything goes wrong, or, it's the first thing that they say, their faith. Like they'll go like to church or to a priest, or you hear about like the holy people, as we say in our culture, like
Eddie, seven sons,
all that kind of stuff, or like Eddie Stone in Clonfert. He's a faith healer, Catholic faith healer, and of course in our community there's people of Protestant religion as well, and so on. But I think they're very spiritual. The traveller community are very spiritual people.
Yeah.
And it's very, very important to them. And like I said, even the younger ones today, I think they still hold on to that.
Yeah. I know you have to do it in a kind of secret way.
Yeah.
It's not cool, or it's not popular.
Yeah, that's it.
I don't think I could live without that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and as well, like, I suppose this issue is the same, but like out the country, like East Galway, it's like a very short time ago, things were very different. It was life was harder. Things were more extreme. Things were, you look back, it seems dark, and it seems, but like that faith, you would have needed it to navigate. And there's, I think in my own little way, that like things were more meaningful. Do you know what I mean? I'm talking like I'm not 22 and I'm 70, but still, just my understanding of all the stories, and you'd hear people talking about the old people, and so I'd hate that we'd even outside of the traveller community as Ireland, like, lose that faith and those things, those gritty things that made us.
I think that Irish society today has become like very materialistic to a degree. And I suppose it's great for progression, and it's great that a lot of people are quite a lot better off than they were, in years gone by. But, the faith, and I suppose when you have nothing, who do you reach? You're going to reach, there's something there in us all. You're going to reach to some higher power, pray. And for us, like, that's God, to Jesus, help us through hard or difficult times, and even financial difficulties. And, you'd be reaching to something. But I think now, because things can be better for a lot of people, or this progression, or we're better educated, or better jobs or whatnot, sometimes we can leave our faith behind, or have it in a box and only take it out when we need it.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm not saying that we should all go back to having nothing and everything. I suppose I'm very grateful for all the things that, So talk to us about, what was it that sparked or was there a key moment that sparked your journey into education then?
There was a key moment. Firstly, well, it was a bit of a journey. Firstly, I'll tell you that I left school when I was very young. I'd say about 14 and a half, maybe not quite 15. And I stayed at home. I had lots of younger sisters and a brother, and I helped my mum look after them. And then I got married, as I said, very, very young. So education, I wasn't, like, I could read and write, and I could read very well. And my father, Lord of mercy on him, he loved books. So we always had loads of books, and I got that from him, the love of reading. And, it opens your mind up to, it's like you're like traveling to all different parts of the world, but you've never been there outside of your own little town. But as I said, after I became widowed after a few years, I got an opportunity to come to Galway Traveller Movement, and it kind of opened up a new world to me. And obviously, firstly, I started getting involved in activism and different things that had been going on around the country. We'd getting involved in that, and we would try and help the traveller families and try, you know, I suppose, empower the families to go after their rights.
Yeah.
And but at one point, someone from the Access, Imelda Byrne from the Access office, she came in from NUIG, and she was talking to a group of us about the Access course. And I was very interested. I was wondering what that was all about, but we were saying to her, you know, university, was that for us? Like, and, you know, especially not having a leaving cert. I didn't even have a junior cert. But I applied for the course and got a hand from different people. Been through Access, you know, friends from the settled community. And the first day at that Access course, I really loved it. But then the big game changer for me was after completing the course, I applied for another it was an arts degree anyway, and I was studying philosophy and sociology and politics. And so the first day that I got my place and I went in, my first lecture, I remember driving out of the university and I was on the highest high. I couldn't believe that here was little me in the university and a student. I could not believe that I, you know, if I never did anything else in my life, I couldn't believe that I'd achieved this, to get this place. Now, that's without taking an exam or anything.
Yeah.
But
just the idea of it,
Yeah, it was a real turning point in my life.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Because it isn't, like, especially when it's... So for a lot of people, it's the done thing. It's expected. Yeah. It was never going to go any other way. But then for other people, I only graduated there a few months ago. I suppose it could be 6 months, a year ago now. And I was thinking about it after, like, what I had done. Yeah. Because I remember at the time, cousins and friends and peers or whatever in England, they leave school at 16. Yeah. And to be a carpenter or to be an electrician or to be a plumber. Yeah. And I remember at the time thinking, me, a plumber, I just would be no good at it. Why would I be like it just doesn't, like, but this is what you do, this is what everybody does. Yeah. You're going to be an electrician. I'm thinking that would be such a, like, it's just a misplacement, like, do you know what I mean? I'm sure I could do it and whatever, but like it was so, but at that time as well, there was I had issues, do you know what I mean? And I was angry and I was kind of very disillusioned. But I made the decision that I had to give it a go. I had to do a leaving cert. Yeah. I had to then see what I could make out of that. I had to push myself. I remember sitting in the kitchen in my father's house one time and he says to me, "What do you want to go to university for?" Which is it's the strangest thing I think the man ever said to me. And I can understand, because in that community, in that little world, you know, and I'm saying he's saying to me, well, you could become a bricklayer and then have a bricklayer company and then make money. You could still have money. But I'm saying, but I couldn't quite get through to him. Why do I have to be a bricklayer? Why can't I be a lawyer or a doctor or a, do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying just about him, but the kind of, I had to break myself out of the community telling me that there's a way to do things. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's so ingrained in people that it's like they genuinely do not understand, what do I want to go to university for? Even when, like, you know, I suppose, well, when the opportunity is there and the brains are there, why wouldn't you? But I just think that's really interesting what you're saying, how the culture, or how any culture can kind of, and maybe it was done out of love in a weird way. Do you know what I mean? That these people don't understand how these systems work and they want to protect you, so they're telling you not to kind of put yourself out there or something. Yeah, I think, you know, I think why I wasn't pushed towards education to go further,
It definitely wasn't done in any kind of a negative way. But because, like, my own family, all my community that I anyone I've ever met, the traveller community, have said, like, they had limited schooling, the older generations, and negative experiences of school, where the expectations were very, very low.
Yes.
And then I suppose I believe, and that's even happening today. Like, obviously there's some brilliant teachers, and there's brilliant educators there, and like, I've had quite a lot of good experience personally myself, but like, there's a lot of biases there. And I suppose if you have a bias towards a community, it's very hard to leave that outside the door when you come into your work environment. And I feel for some teachers, like, that expectations, like, I know that it's happening today even. There's children getting put to the back of the class. They're segregated to a degree.
It's before the child ever walked in.
Yeah, it's, you know, you're expected, or like in our community about marriage, which marriage is very important to us. But like, a lot of teachers would be saying, you know, because why I know this, I've people that were people I know, friends that were teachers. And a person from our own community, she was a teacher, but at the time she didn't disclose that to anyone she worked with, that she was from the traveller community. So obviously people would talk and say things and not aware. And they were saying, you know, don't bother teaching them. They're grand. They're not going to stick at school. It's not for them. And like, they don't work anyway. And the girls are going to just leave and get married when they're 16. So like, don't even bother.
Yeah.
So I believe myself, if you have that attitude in a school environment, well, then you're not going to push a child. You're not going to encourage a child. So if that child feels like, you know, I'm not part of the classroom, I'm segregated from the classroom, well, they're not going to push themselves either.
No.
Because they'll feel like that.
Why would they?
Why would you? And I'm not able to do that, you know. And like, I come in my working life, I'm coming across that all of the time. Or I've had in the past, we'd had parents that were very active in their children's education, you know, going to school meetings, never missing anything, making sure this child had everything for school, always there. And there was a lady, I won't disclose her name, and she was being told, Mrs. So-and-so, your son, he's a brilliant student, he's brilliant, he's very good. And she was so proud, and she asked him one day to read something from the newspaper, and he couldn't read. He couldn't read at all. He could not read at all.
That's because the expectation is so low.
And it was...
Is that what you're saying? That like...
The teacher was commenting on the child's behaviour, he was so good, but had never... The child's literacy levels and numeracy levels were so low.
Yeah.
And the mother was being told this child was doing well and he was so good, but she didn't realise that the child, until she herself asked the child to read something, and he couldn't read it. So
I could tell you 100 stories from going to school, especially secondary school. So, you know, just the predetermined, you are like, it's actually and I wonder, people who aren't Irish who come here, can they even tell the difference, right? But it must seem so bizarre to them, the level of deeply ingrained, not even subconscious, I don't know, the exclusion is ridiculous, like, to the point where, and I knew we had a girl in our year, I won't say her name, but I thought I loved her. She was such a, like, even she was such we used to laugh that she was so much mature. You know, she must have been 15, 16, but she was a grown woman, and she had no time for her nonsense. Do you know what I mean? And she, just the way she carried herself, she was a beautiful person. and she left, and she left at 16, and I assume got married and had a family and all of that. And I often thought afterwards, like after she was gone, like, oh, I hope, like, you know, I hope she's happy, or I hope she's doing her thing, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? But that's fine, I suppose. That's her choice and her family's choice and the culture and all of that. But then for the ones that stayed, okay, this will make you laugh now, right? So I was when we came home from England, I must have been 8 or 9. So, and then they put me in, I was in Kilconnell National School, and initially, I think they put me in 4th class or something, and then I was getting angry and disillusioned, and then they sat me and I did the test for the end of the year, and then they put me up a year, you know, and but I obviously hadn't had the like grounding in Irish, so then when I went to secondary school, it was like I was just automatically exempted, and that's one of like my biggest regrets, I think, that like because then when I came to college, I loved the Irish language and surrounded myself with Gaeilgeoirs and all this, but in secondary school then, right, we were put, or I was put in a class for the exempt, and it was me, a fella from Sudan, and the traveler, or Sudan, and the traveller kids, and we were playing cards in the class, and this dozy old teacher falling asleep at the top minding us, and you know, all the bravado that comes with an all boys school, and the rows that we used to have. But like, it's like the sectioning out, the putting in a corner, to be written off. I had another friend, brilliant guy, brains, like, do you know what I mean? And so then he finished school and he went to do journalism, and people used to ask, was he a traveller? Because the fact that he's gone to university, maybe he wasn't a traveller. Yeah. That's bizarre. That's so strange, like, that somehow you can get a degree and it will change your ethnic, cultural, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's it, I suppose. Like, people, like I said earlier, like the stereotypes, the negative stereotypes that a lot of the times aren't reflective of the community, and you know that if you're educated or what have you, that you're not a typical traveller, or is it going to change your identity?
Yeah.
No, like your culture is your culture. You're not going to change. Like I suppose you couldn't change if you wanted to. You know, you just couldn't.
Yeah.
But you know, your parents, what you are, your family, your background, where you've come from, like all of that makes you who you are.
Definitely.
And even if you don't express it, like it's so part, you know, it's just really ingrained in you, like it's there. But yeah,
like, I just think that's funny. Like, oh, he went to university, so he's not black anymore. Like, it's
crazy.
So, like, such is the level of disdain for the travellers. Do you know what I mean? I remember another time, so all the fighting that we did in first and second year of secondary school. But now this fella was a bad boy, like, and one day he spat in my hood. Not because he was a traveller, because, you know, he must have had issues or whatever. That's all water under the bridge. That's not the point of this story. But I remember being in the petrol station up the hill in Ballinasloe, and, you know, the thing of my mother telling me to get out and pay for it, like.
Yeah.
And I gone up and I'm at the window or whatever, and I can see your man's brother behind me, and my legs started shaking. Like, I was so, like, intimidated. Not that he even noticed me or looked at me or that I knew him. I just knew him as your man's brother. And I remember getting back into the car. And this was years and years ago. But I remember thinking, if, you know, in a reverse way, if you're stood outside the petrol station and a black fella walks up behind you and your leg is shaking that bad, do you know, that's like race, like, do you know, that's ignorance, and that you can't carry on like that. So I thought afterwards, it's not because of anybody's culture or anybody's identity. It's just, you know, some people have it hard and act out and blah blah blah. But like, so I suppose what I'm saying is I had to be self-aware in that moment and not be like, do you know, ignorant about.
Yeah, I suppose like labeling, you know, and like even in labeling theory, and sometimes when people are labeled long enough, they can take on the identity of the label that's been, you know, put on them. And obviously in our community, there's people who are good, bad, and different. And I suppose that's the same for all cultures, all communities. Like, there's people that are good and there's people that are bad. But I think it's very stupid sometimes when the way like the traveller community they're described in the media or what have you. And if something happens with one person, like they'll say the travellers, as if it's the whole community.
Yeah.
You know, and like I know that I was involved in something before in a group, and I was saying, you know, when I walk into a room, I can't be me, Anne Marie Stokes. I have to carry the sins of 40,000 people on my back. Like, that's this 40,000 travellers in the country, in north and south. So it's like, I suppose, from if you're a black man or whatever, and if you're going in and you can't be Paraic, you have to, you know, everything that's going on with all the black community all over. It's very unfair, I think.
It's very unfair. Oh, it's patently unfair. And what does that feel like? 40,000. That's really interesting. That I suppose, and then the tribal community must feel that prejudgment.
Yeah.
And what does that do to a person?
Well, I'll tell you straight off the bat, like, the suicide rate in the traveller community is 6-7 times higher than of the wider population. So, like, suicide is a big thing in the community. Depression, anxiety is a big thing in the community. And obviously there's drug use and so on. But I do really believe that a lot of that comes from the discrimination. Like, if you can imagine every day of your life, every service that you access, everywhere you go, even if you weren't discriminated against, it's an expectation. There's the expectation today, if I walk to this pub, or if I walk to this restaurant, or even to a shop, well, will I be refused service? Will I be treated differently? Or if I go into a school, or I go into a college, like in my own experience, when I went to university, I had the tutors, the lecturers, they were wonderful. But not all the students were wonderful. Like, when I first, like, I didn't, obviously, I'm not going around with a placard on my head saying, like, I'm Anne Marie Stokes, I'm a member of the traveller community. I just was a very quiet person. I was just going in. I wanted to do my work and get out, because I had a day job as well, and I had 3 children at home to get home to. And
you were there for a reason.
I had a reason, and I had a goal, and I wanted to educate myself. And I suppose I wouldn't have been as strong at that time, I suppose, you know, as an activist, I wouldn't have been as strong at that particular time as I am now today. And, you know, I met friends with people, or people I talked to, and then, you know, someone from my area, they had been doing some course, and I was seeing anyway. So over time, people that used to talk to me or say hello stopped talking to me. And this one really good friend, and like, that's 16 years ago, and she's my best friend today, and she's from the Czech Republic. Lucia is her name. I wish she won't mind me saying that. She's my best friend. And over the years, people had come to her and said, oh, do you know, like, she's from the traveller community. Like, why would you be associating with her? And, you know, like
and she's not even, not to be divisive again, but you're not even Irish. You're an immigrant, and then this indigenous group of people are placed. That's so bizarre to me that...
which she found it very strange, like, and she, obviously, as I said, she's my best friend, and, like, we're very so close, and, like, I suppose we carried each other through, like, the first year, like, at college, you know how it's the high dropout rate the first year, and I suppose I'd say she's superiorly smarter than me, but I suppose she was the one that carried me through. But I suppose encouraging, and it was nice to have someone there to encourage and so on. But I remember another friend, a girl I had at the time that I knew, and she was doing her PhD at that time, and she's from the traveller community, and she said to me, Marie, when you go in there, you just remember you're doing the same thing that all the rest of the students are doing. You're doing your exams, you're getting through them, and, you know, don't feel like you're not good enough. And it's just them words just kept in my head, but it was extremely hard. Not that I was looking for friendships, but it was hard to be so ostracized.
Yeah,
you know, it was tough. And, you know, just having that expectation all the time, that was just an example of my own personal experience in university with some of the students. And there was some people that were very nice and what have you. But, you know, it's that, you know, discrimination against our community, the stereotype, the negativity. Yeah. And thank God, luckily, that I didn't have the experience with the tutors and lecturers of poor expectations. I think there were very high expectations.
Yeah.
And that pushed me.
Yeah.
And, you know, like...
Those people wouldn't have been so... Well, you'd hope that those, like, you know, through the education of those people wouldn't be so... They might be a bit more open-minded and less...
Yeah, that's what you'd be hoping for, like, people to be more open-minded. But, as I said, with the high expectations from lectures and tutors and encouragement, like, I went on, I progressed, I got my honours BA, and then I went on and I did my master's. So that was, I think, encouragement, and obviously my own determination, but encouragement and high expectations. And it's just a pity if we didn't see a bit more of that in, like, the primary and secondary schools, and you'd probably get the same results from the kids.
Yeah, definitely. I can kind of relate to that in a way that in school they would have tried to write me off as well. Yeah. But it can kind of go both ways then, because it's either they're trying to write you off, or like that they can see you that what you're trying to do is special, is important. It's not just you doing the run of the mill what society expects from you. There is something more to it when you know you come from one of these communities. And you must be a travel lady with a master's degree. That's like, you must feel proud of yourself, like. You must want to inspire in others.
Well, I suppose I'd be a lie if I said I wasn't proud of myself. I am. But, like, I still pinch myself and say, gosh, did I do that? Like, I know, like, thousands and thousands of people in Ireland do that all the time.
Yeah.
But in our community, it's like there's a small minority. Now, it shouldn't be that way. There's less than, I think, like, less than 1% of the traveller community have third level qualification. And obviously, because in my career and my work, I want to change that. Well, I'd say I want to be part of a whole system that changes that. And, like, I go in, and when I talk to students or talk to children or adults, all age groups, like, I say, if I did that, you can do that. There's possibilities. And obviously in our own community, we have a lot of we'll start calling them in GTM now, Galway Travel Movement, change makers.
Yeah.
And like, we do have doctors, we do have solicitors, we have writers, we have poets, and you know, we've people with lots of different qualifications, and like, they are change makers, and change makers in terms of, first of all, change in the mindset of the wider community, but also maybe inspiring and pushing,
shining examples,
to the community.
Yeah.
But it's sad as well that there are some members of the traveller community that are in, you know, good jobs and have good educations, that they have to hide their identity for fear of this being ostracized, or, you know, being maybe not outward discrimination, you know, but that kind of how would you say, you know, underhand, be treated differently, and then resulting in being pushed out of a work environment.
Yeah. Because
I've seen that with people working, and, you know, they hid their identity, and when it would come to light, obviously, you know, laws that are in place, people can't be maybe sometimes blatantly racist, but you can be treated so badly that you're pushed out of your job, and what like, that does to a person. You
definitely know? It's a sad indictment that I've never had a minimum wage job where there wasn't a blanket discrimination, where there wasn't like a, you know, kind of, there's almost like an alarm goes off when somebody who looks like a traveller comes in, or where, if I'm being blatantly honest, where the K word wasn't used.
Yeah.
And I think in this day and age, that you just can't. You can't use the N word. You can't use, like, it's just, that's out of order, like. Do you know what I mean? There's, so going back to the point, like, it must be really difficult when you know that this is going on and it is so prevalent and it is so ever present, to like engage then with, and do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, I suppose, yeah, it's like, firstly, there's no accountability.
Yeah.
Like, and what I mean accountability, yeah, we know there is laws in place at the moment, and when they're implemented, that's good and well. You know, and the people can't be sometimes blatantly racist, but it's just the tone. It's just when a traveller goes into the room, and or if you don't probably look like whatever a typical traveller is supposed to look like, when you identify as you're a part of the community, there's just a different kind of feeling in the room, different tone, body language. And, you know, that does stop people from the community really integrating or engaging with the settled community unless they have to. And I know that's a big thing to say, but I can see like the fear in members of my community of like going, obviously they're not going to say, oh, I'm afraid, but like going in there trying to work or trying to progress through education and knowing too well that you won't be accepted. Yeah. You know, it's extremely
hard.
Like
to hide the fact that you're to even have to make an attempt to conceal is ridiculous. Like, that's an awful, like, yes, it works, or it might work, but even to have a society in which you're saying, if you want a fair crack at the whip, pretend to be settled, or pretend to be, that's not on, like, especially, like, and I wonder, I'm not an expert on this, but, and you might know more about it than me, but my idea of the discrimination is that it kind of came in the 60s, wasn't it? There was like the itinerancy project, or in
1963 the itinerancy report was written, and I suppose like a group of government officials or what have you. They went out and I suppose like did their little investigation around the traveller community, and they wrote it as how to get rid of the traveller problem, how to get rid of them, and how could they be integrated into society and so on. And you know, that report, like, that's just one or two things that I can think off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I know I cited it in my thesis for my master's in university, and it was absolutely blatantly racist. And to think that report influenced legislation, it influenced all these strategies that were developed to deal with the traveller community right down until the late 80s. And, you know, it's so blatantly racist. Like, if that kind of document was written and associated with any other community, which I wouldn't be in agreement with, you know, there would be an outcry.
Like, I'm a great man for defending the Irish state and Irish people, and we're not that bad, but that is one area that I think is like, that's like something you'd hear about happening to a group in America or something. Like, that's disgusting. Like, so you've come on a group of people who don't act well, like, no, who have a culture that you deem inferior or whatever, right? And you've like the traveller problem, the itinerant problem, and as well, you'll hear people out the country that use that word itinerant as well, that they don't know that that's where it comes from, but that is like the root of it. And it's just, oh my God, like.
But then it's acceptable.
And I just wanted to say as well that, what I was trying to say at the beginning of that was that I would have had, growing up, I would have had a very different story of, you know, people. My aunt, she's 102. She only died there a few months ago. Lord rest her soul. And she was talking about how they'd have porridge in the morning and they'd have potatoes every 3 or 4 days. And that she hated women who wore a lipstick because it was her digging with mud in her face from picking up the potatoes. And but in that same kind of, I wasn't there in 1935, but in that same world of the stories that I've inherited, the travellers weren't, there's a really weird narrative about the travellers now. And it wasn't, I'm told, it wasn't that then. It was that they would come along and they were sound, and, you know, they didn't have it, but they didn't have anything, but nobody had anything. Yeah. And you'd give them whatever you had, and they'd tell stories or they'd do whatever, and they go off again. And it was a much nicer relationship to the traveller community than the one that we have now.
Yeah, I remember, like, my grandmother, and like, she was telling stories, and she was born in 1921.
Yeah. And
her experiences, she had a very good experience with the settled community, and
the country people.
She loved the country people, and they were from County Clare, and mostly around Innistyman they lived, or Lahinch, and small little towns there. And it was a great experience, and she, like that, they'd move to certain areas and they'd work for the farmers, they'd do work, they'd sell their wares, and the men, like, they were tinsmiths, and they'd mend pots and so on for the people and all that. And they had they were welcomed.
Yeah.
They were welcomed, but it's just, I think in the latter years, in the 60s and so on.
That's what I think it is.
The turning point. And I think when Ireland started
getting notions.
Getting notions, the economy, things start getting better for the wider Irish community. I think this, you know, racism and all this, like, looking down on a certain group. Yeah. And I suppose, like, when I've read, like, different documents about different like minority or ethnic groups around the world, and that there's always this, like, scapegoating, and it's the travellers or it's the whatever different indigenous groups around the world, that they're always scapegoated. And that's not to say that I'm saying all.
Somebody has to be under the boot.
Someone has to be under the boot, and it's not saying like that our community is perfect, far from it. But I'm saying to label a whole group of people, like it's so unfair and so stupid.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and hopefully, right, we're not going to lose all our money and our privileges and our electricity and everything, but please God, can we just, like, the notions, let them go. Can we not, like, remember, especially when we weren't always like this, do you know what I mean? I'm an old romantic, I was told here last week. But I just think, like, how can we treat the travelers like that, do you know? Like, just fucking, I know, if I had a magic wand kind of a thing. But people like you, Anne Marie, and Galway Travelling Movement are doing so much.
Well, thank you for saying that. But like, look, and yourself having me here today to be able to speak, like, collaboration is key to everything. And I suppose having spaces where you can have questions and answers, like we did quite a lot of work over the years with the university, and the not teachers now, but the trainee teachers, I don't know what they're calling them today, PME students.
Yeah.
We used to have like spaces there. We deliver workshops, and we were doing like I suppose cultural awareness workshops or anti-racism training and so on. But we'd also like have a space at the end where we're saying like we can have questions now, and we'll open the floor. Don't feel like bad if you want to ask us any questions. So people were coming up with all sorts, like, and things that were true, and we'd confirm, yeah, that's true. But there was different things like, about maybe like babies, like being, like betrothed to each other when they were babies, and they'd be married like at a later stage, like all, which is untrue. But I think it's important to have a safe space for, yes, to voice your opinion, and if you want to ask questions. And that's because education, like getting back to it all.
Yeah.
Education is not all about reading books and passing exams. Education is about learning about different communities and their way of life.
Yeah, and I think as well. So we had some technical difficulties, but we're back now. And I suppose really what we're saying is that such is the power of education, that you can get through anything if you really set your mind to it and achieve, and even that does a lot for your community. Even you're being successful yourself is not even really a selfish endeavour. Yeah.
It's well, I suppose, like, as you said, like, determination will get you through. And I suppose, like, if you got support and you've got people that have high expectations of you, like, that will push you to go forward, and that goes across like everyone, like all communities, all groups, different people. But I suppose definitely from people that have experienced racism and discrimination, like, you do need that added, I suppose, push, and someone to believe in them, to push them forward. And I suppose that maybe one good teacher or one good friend say, you can do that, you're capable of doing that. That high expectations, as I've said earlier, I think quite a few times now. Yeah. But
I was usually an English teacher for me. I had really good English teachers. Yeah.
Well, that's it. Like, and as I said, I had two friends that were pushing me and telling me that I could do it, and I was capable of doing it. And I you have this what's it called all the time? Like, I had this all the time, imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah.
Should I be here? Like, am I able for this? Am I capable of doing this? Like, you'd be questioning yourself all the time, but just determine and just I'm gonna do it. And then when you when you get through education and you get your education, you finish your education, and you get your attain your degree or what have you. Like, I think then it's a kind of a ripple effect, and in a good way, because firstly, you're showing your own community, your own family, your immediate family, that, if my mother, if my friend, if my sister, my daughter can do this, and she did do this, and maybe in a difficult circumstance, and I suppose I'm talking now personally, but you could reflect that on anyone, any individual who's come through a lot of hardship or has experienced discrimination or has been at the receiving end of biases or negativity, and they have fought through. It does kind of encourage others for it to kind of really keep going. You can do it. You can do it. And I suppose for me, like, I didn't progress to education in the normal route, like going through the junior cert and leaving cert and going on. I came back as a mature student and as a lone parent, as a widow, and all these other all these other labels.
Yeah.
And but people can go different ways. But as I said, it's kind of encouragement. Like, my kids know if that's what they want to do, they know they can do it. My mother has done it. I can do that. And I always say that to the children that I talk to, the students, the young people, or as I say, older people, adults of any age, I've done this, you can do this. You just need to be determined, and you need to push. And I suppose, like, it's not just me. There's lots of other members of the community now that are going through education. Like, last year we had 24 members of the community, and they won an Intis Award, and they went through the Access programme together, and now that's going to be duplicated. Am I using the right word? I can't think of at this stage, in different areas throughout the country. And like, that's a push for other members of the community to go forward. And I suppose, as well as that, just being in a university setting or a college or whatnot, it's breaking the negative stereotypes that travellers don't value education, they won't go through education, and maybe that they're lazy in some way. And I think this is just breaking, hopefully it'll be breaking negative stereotypes, and people will understand that we're different. We have a different culture and a set of beliefs, norms, a different way of living, but we're still human beings, and we're still part of Irish society, whether or not the wider Irish community want to accept us or not. We've been there like for hundreds of years. Like, You're
not from anywhere else.
We're not from anywhere else. Like, recently there was a doc in, I think, 1166, and there was some census or something done in Ireland, and they documented about the traveller community. So, like, that's hundreds of years ago. We were there, and even
and don't let yourself be made feel out of place then.
Yeah, that's it. Like, that we're part of the Irish society, and I think that people need to educate themselves more about the community, and to know, like, that collaboration is key to breaking down barriers, and that we're, like, in the Galway Traveller Movement, and also a lot of our traveller organisations throughout the country, like, that they're open to, people, they're open to dialogue. Like, schools, we're always trying to engage with schools, And we have delivered workshops to schools successfully. And in the county, we had, a few months ago, we had in the early summer, we had our traveller ethnicity roadshow, where we had a lorry with the screen on it, and we brought it to schools in the county, and I think 2 schools in the city, Galway City, and it was for the whole school community. And we it was about we had short videos about traveller culture, and I suppose I think there was a bit about the traveller economy and so on. And it's great to have that, not just us going in and talking to the traveller students, but we need to talk to the whole school community, and that's where you break down barriers.
Definitely. Can I just say, Anne Marie, that you're such a beautiful person, and your message is spot on, and it's not angry, and it's hopeful, and it's education. You're so right, you're so right. Thank you for coming in, and hopefully people will see this now and see that it is kind of that simple. Do you know what I mean? That we have this issue, and that's the way to go about it. Not with more kind of division and anger and all of that. And I'd be very much that way too. That education and familiarity, do you know what I mean? And mutual respect go a hell of a long way.
That's it, Paraic. I want to thank you also for this opportunity to come and to speak to you. And also I'm part of Garn as well. I'm a Garn member, and I think it's such an important space to be in, and to work together. Dialogue is so important, because all of us as human beings, we want acceptance. We want acceptance, and none of us wants to be labelled. And as we're saying throughout this talk, education is key, and it's brilliant to have our 3rd level degrees, and that's great, and great for our self-esteem, and maybe to be a role good, and to be a role model maybe for your own family, your own community, what have you. But also being educated about other communities, about other groups. It's so important, and that's where you break down these barriers, these racist ideas, biases. They just to dialogue, talk to each other. That's where we bring about huge change.
That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. That was great. You're brilliant.
Did you enjoy that, did you? Well, fair play to you for getting to the end anyway. Why don't you watch another one? That one is the one that YouTube thinks that you'd like the most. And if you'd like access to some exclusive content, you can get the link in our description, which will bring you to the Patreon page. Thank you. Gur Mila Mahat.